it's Wednesday. We have Michael Taylor on. Today we're going to be talking about Chia's data layer. Michael, I don't know if you want to say hi to everyone. Give them the sound of your voice.
Well, how you doing, everybody? Nice to be here. Nice to talk to some powerhouses in our community. Always a pleasure any day.
Well, speaking of, I mean, you and Grant can take that position. I'm a cheerleader here in the Chia community. Michael, the data layer is one of the things that I'm most excited about on Chia. A decentralized internet, I think, is a path forward that the world needs, even if it doesn't understand that it needs it. Can you just give me a basic description of how you see the data layer in your mind? I know that I've heard you describe it as databases that operate alongside the Chia blockchain, but how do you roughly describe it whenever you're telling somebody about data layer?
Yeah, well, that's definitely a description that evolves by the day as I gain even more understanding for myself. Ultimately, what data layer is a protocol that allows you to share data while maintaining the integrity of that data in relation to the publisher's intent. And this is important because since we have the ability to enforce the publisher's intent, we now open up the possibility for completely untrusted parties to be providers of that data set, and you don't need to trust that they didn't modify the data set. So this has really important implications when it comes to things that might be on the data layer, such as dApps. We want to build infrastructure that allows unstoppable dApps to propagate around the world. And in order to achieve that, we need people all over the network to be able to provide backups. And it's really important, especially when you're using dApps, that we know that the particular person that is providing it to us as a user didn't modify it to drain our wallets, for example. So the data layer's protocol gives you a cryptographic proof that the data you're consuming has been unaltered since it was published.
Got you. And I've seen you post recently that, and the title of the show is Data Layer 2.0. What sort of innovations are you talking about with regards to I don't know, a new improved data layer, or what have been some of the issues that needed improving that led to
sure. Yeah, so, well, just a quick disclaimer. I don't know if it's appropriate for me to call what I built Data Layer 2.0, because I know that there's other Data Layer 2.0s that are at least being conceptualized on the CNI side. But for me,
is CNI contemplating a 2.0 of data layer, or are they just keep working on the data layer they've already been working on?
At the bare minimum, they're contemplating it, and that's all I can really say. But
suffice it to say, this is you've broken with the existing CNI data layer. So this is some other data layer style thing that you've now
absolutely started. Yeah. So I'll kind of describe that. So a little bit of history on data layer. The first data layer, like the expectation was that it was going to serve CAD-T and not much beyond that. So it was very, very specifically built for the CAD-T system. And there wasn't any expectation, like, you know, the door was open, you know, but there wasn't really any expectation the data layer would go beyond that. So when I started conceptualizing a way to leverage this technology to build this distributed, like it's essentially a distributed CDN that allows you to share data all over the world in an open protocol. And I actually started making progress and making that a reality. Like it was completely unexpected. So you know, so what kind of I ran into along the way is the first implementation wasn't built for the aspirations I had for it. And I tried massaging it over the years to make it work in the way that I wanted to. And I had like a couple of different iterations. Some of those iterations I published publicly. Other ones I never saw the light of day. But ultimately, what I found is with the way that it was currently implemented, it just wasn't built for routine use, no matter how hard I tried. And I sat down and I interviewed with many developers and publishers in our industry, like one-on-one in a Zoom call, trying to give them the case, like, you should be using this and I'm going to help you use it. And it kind of reached the point where like no one was able to use it unless I sat down and walked them through it. So I really started to get an idea on and start building up a wish list where if Datalayer is going to, you know, take over the world, what does it need to do? And I kind of iterated over and over again, like just by interviewing, you know, all our community members and what their needs are. And I started to get a clear idea on what needs to happen. And I also, you know, I made comments to the CNI's team along the way. I was like, can we why isn't it built like do this? Why isn't it built like that? You know, there's reasons for you know, everyone has their different reasons for their architectural decisions. And I kind of saw that my wish list, if it was going to happen, it wasn't going to be for many, many years. So earlier this summer, I realized I need to build my own client, and that was the only way forward in order to meet the goals I had for it.
And so you mentioned that CNIs was for CAD Trust, but in your mind, you wanted Datalayer to be easy enough to use by everyone. You mentioned taking over the world, which
yeah,
which gives me chills, tickles me to the bone.
In my view, like if this is built right, this is how this would be a new standard for how the internet is served. And yeah, that's a grand ambition, but you know you gotta reach high in order to at least get halfway. But I do think that this is very powerful and can be a new standard for the internet, at least one that a lot of use cases would really want, whether they realize it or not.
Well, so when I think about you know, maybe some of the problems apart from easing the making it easier for different projects to come, or different people to understand and use the data layer, I also think about the propagation of data. Is that something? Is that a hurdle that you had to jump over in redesign, or?
Oh yes, absolutely. That's front and center. The original protocol was built to be purely peer to peer, which is lovely. If we didn't have gnats getting in our way. I found that like it wasn't good enough just to put instructions on like out there saying this is how you port forward data layer. Because when I tried, there's a few people that when I got in a call with them and I tried to walk them through how to figure out their particular NAT, they couldn't even access it. Like the password, the password to the router was long gone. And that's when I realized that we really need to make a separation of user types between the people that want to be nodes in the network and the people that just want to build applications and deploy it there. And that really drove the architectural decisions for this new system that I've been working on. I'm trying to build a network that incentivizes node operators to mirror data from the average developer that just wants to put their application up on the network. And go ahead.
Well, I don't mean to interrupt, but when you say incentivizes operators, I remember that at some point you were working, you were trying to figure out some sort of coin for file propagation. So is this going to be a pay to is there a pay to propagate that is part of the data layer, or
yes.
how?
Yes, absolutely. Well, there's a lot of different ways to go about it. The holy grail is conceptualizing some sort of consensus mechanism that will, auto mint a coin if everyone agrees that the nodes behaved properly. I still haven't cracked that nut yet, and how to do it in a way that can't be cheated on. So what I kind of fell back on the short term is I kind of decided, storage is a finite resource. Whether you're using a centralized host or a decentralized host, you're still going to have to pay for storage. So the way that I'm kind of looking at it, at least for the short term, is you're still going to have your storage fee. The difference is that it's going to be distributed to the nodes on the network that contributed to keeping to reaching a certain decentralization score on the network, instead of paying a single person to store in a single place. And so I imagine this like a building tools to like create campaigns. Like I'm going to pay, I don't know, $10 a month to all my mirrors, and if it's worth it to them, they mirror your store, and through like an Oracle service that I would provide, they get paid out for doing what they said they were going to do. So, and I imagine that like builds up this entire concept of a mirror market, where the nodes can programmatically query the market, find the most profitable offers, and then mirror the stores, as long as they stay profitable, and continue to reshuffle what they're actually mirroring based on the profitability of the offers. And that actually creates a really powerful censorship resistance mechanism, because not only is your data not only is your data spread out, like backed up all over the world, where only one peer needs to have it in order for everybody to use it, but those peers are constantly reshuffling based on the economics of the market. So if someone wants to try to shut some like one node down, for example, well, tomorrow that node might be mirroring something completely different. So it's like you just can't, track it.
This is very cool. It's exciting to see or think about a blockchain in which you can participate and get monetization for more than just providing consensus security or farming on Chia. So what you're saying is I turn on my Chia node, and it would it would essentially bring up a different data layer, different I guess folders of varying sizes that I could devote space to and be paid according to whatever they decide they're willing to pay per month for hosting that data.
Yeah, I mean the high level idea is whatever the user pays will be split up across all the mirrors. So, and then as more and more mirrors come online for your store, profitability for per mirror will go down. So, like if you have put up $10 per month, and one person mirrors your store, they get all $10. If two people mirror your store, they get $5 each. Eventually, you reach a point where it's saturated and it's just not worth it. So you start losing mirrors. It will normalize it, but those mirrors that dropped off will now look for the next mirror that's profitable. So the market is the mirror market. It will actually be like highly dynamic at any given time. The profitability of particular stores will go up and down, and that allows the nodes themselves to make decisions about what is they want to actually serve, what is they actually want to mirror, compared to how much space they actually have, and so on. And I did some very high level ballpark calculations of like how much you can actually make in a mature system like this. And I don't, like, without giving like exact numbers, like I kind of came to the conclusion that there's a high likelihood that this providing storage space to serve it's the DIG network is what I'm calling it, the Decentralized Internet Gateway Network. Providing storage space for the DIG network should be a lot more profitable than just farming Chia. So like I do think that they can compete for plot space, for example.
Okay, so if we take a quick step back about what your intentions about the next generation of the internet. So you've talked about it being a decentralized internet, right? So when you think about a decentralized internet, I think at one point you contemplated having like a prefix, right? In a way that you would address things like Tor. Is that still like your intention, that when you go to your web browser, you would say, I don't know, something like Chia : / or something like that, and that's how you would address?
Well, I would like to see that. I'm not saying that I've exhausted all avenues, but I feel like IPFS was also running into this situation. Browsers and browser extensions, to my understanding, just don't have a mechanism for custom protocols. So the way that I really saw this is, if this really blows up and I'm able to achieve a level of funding to take this to the next level, I think building a custom browser that not only honors this protocol, but also validates proofs behind the scenes that the data that you got is legit, might be how we accomplish that.
And that's what you mean by client, right? When we're talking about a client for the decentralized internet, it really does come down to having some sort of a browser. And when you say it's plugged in, that means that the browser itself would be looking at the Chia blockchain.
Yes. Okay. There's the compromise, and then there's the true decentralized solution. Right now, the compromise, if you're familiar with the Datalayer.link service, it's a Web 2 gateway that when you make a request, it queries the network for a node and then serves the data from that node through that gateway, which has a, you're still accessing the distributed CDN. However, you're relying on data layer link to stay up. That's like the short-term compromise. The holy grail is a browser that doesn't rely on any Web 2 gateway. Internally, when you make a request to the network, internally it queries this, for the pointers to where the data is. Internally, it selects a peer, loads it into your browser, and internally it validates the proof that peer gave you legitimate data. And once you achieve that, there isn't centralized infrastructure that can be shut down.
So to think about this, I would be going and getting a client. So the way that we access the internet right now, I either go get Firefox or Chrome or Microsoft Edge or whatever, like some kind of a gateway into the internet, and then I start typing in URLs to the browser bar, and that's how I see the world. And I have to understand where data is by going to some kind of a search engine like Google or something like that, right? That's how I find information.
The discovery is another project on top of this that would be important once the basic infrastructure is up. Actually, I think the actual discovery mechanism for content on the distributed web is actually the killer app itself.
Well, it's almost easier, right? If everything's published via data layer on Chia, discovering things is just processing every single block, right?
Well, right. I think there's still challenges that need to be solved, because right now the only thing you see on chain is store IDs. Now with the new chip that Yak and I just submitted, we have the ability to add a little bit more metadata on chain for indexing purposes. So we, places like SpaceScan, for example, can index a data layer store and actually give useful information about that store without having to download the data that is associated with. But I think that there is still a lot more that needs to be engineered to basically have the Google of the distributed web that's powered by data layer.
So when you publish something on the new version of data layer, you're saying a little bit about the type of data that's there as well as the store ID.
Yeah. So we added so the first version of data layer, the only thing that's stored on chain is the hash of the store that your off-chain software can compare for integrity checks. Yak and I added the ability to add arbitrary metadata fields to the puzzle itself. This with a standard being label, description, and bytes. And you can add more. It just increases the cost of the of the puzzle. But by doing this, we can see on chain, okay, what's the name of the store, an optional description, like for a little bit more information. But the most important thing is how big the store is, and that's like hugely important for nodes that want to store data. They need to be able to see how big the data is without having to download it. If I'm a node with 1 terabyte versus a node with 10 terabytes, or if I'm a node with 1 gigabyte, I don't want to have to pull down like a 15 terabyte data store to find out that I'm out of space before, I want to know that ahead of time.
And a little bit about the technical propagation of data. Did you still just keep using whatever CNI had inside their data layer? Or if you've got some big file, is there a way to say, hey, I already have the first 20%. I'm just trying to get the last 80 because something got interrupted? Or have you had to work on that kind of stuff? Or is it still just connect to the node and start asking for data the same way that CNI had it set up?
Well, actually, I think you described a couple of different things. There's data propagation, which I'll touch on in a second, but there's also, retrieving data from the store itself. The CNI's data layer does not support file streaming, and on top of that, they made a couple of different decisions. First, like they don't support file streaming, so by default, data layer RPCs had like a 25 megabyte limit. You could adjust that in the config files, but then you run the risk of other nodes not being able to reach your data. The second issue that I saw was that they're storing the entire binary blob of the data in the leaves of the Merkle tree themselves, which for CAT-T was, I guess, fine because it's relatively small data. But once you start going to gigabytes, you're storing that in the Merkle tree. And then finally, they're storing the binary blobs in a SQLite database, which we were running into issues with large data stores where RPCs were just locking up because there's just too much I/O going on. So the new system that I built, first of all, it streams data in and out of the system. So there's never like the full there's never the full size of the data in memory at any given time. The next thing I did is I'm only storing the SHA-256 in the Merkle tree, and that SHA-256 acts as a pointer to locate a binary blob on the file system. And I don't use a database at all. I actually encode everything into the file system. So there isn't a choke point, for the database, where just too many things are happening and the table is locked. The new implementation actually doesn't use a database at all. It actually, interestingly, when I designed it, I built it a way that I like independently. But then when I was talking to somebody, they were like, and I was explaining them how it worked. They sent me a link that describes Git's object model, and I almost re-engineered it to the T. Not quite the same, but it was like almost the same approach. So the new data layer that I worked on actually is closer to how Git works than how it was originally built. And as a matter of fact, I even built the user interface to feel like Git. Like you now, instead of having a central, place in your computer where all the Merkle trees are stored, your Merkle tree is stored in your local repository, and you just use the tool to push commit to it, and use the tool to push to dig nodes. And I just think it feels a lot more natural because it doesn't actually require a client running in the background. It just operates, on one Merkle tree at a time. It's very lightweight. It can be run in CI. So now we're going to have the ability to commit to data layer and push to a dig node, whether local or a service like GitHub, for example, in CI. And I think that will be huge for mass adoption for dApps, for the dApp use case. People can build dApps, publish them, it goes right to data layer, and it propagates to the network.
So when we had Bram on the other day, I asked him a few questions about Datalayer, and I asked him, I said, hey, you built a distributed file system protocol, as like one of the premier things that have ever existed. It's BitTorrent. And I asked him why some of the techniques that exist inside of BitTorrent weren't used for Datalayer, and I got a interesting answer to that question. I guess I would pose the same question to you: is how much have you looked at BitTorrent as far as adapting some of the concepts within that to doing the distribution of the data? Because go ahead.
No, I was just going to go ahead, finish what you're saying. I was just kind of nodding.
Yeah, because I mean, if you think about what BitTorrent did fundamentally, right? It's saying I have some file and I have the ability to seed this file, and you have this swarm of all these people who want to download it, and so you've got multiple peers that are trying to get the data. They're also serving the data up as they get it. So you're not constrained to serving the data once you have it in its entirety. If you have some pieces of it, you can start sending those out to the network from anybody that needs it immediately. So there's these concepts of swarm and how to bust through the firewalls, and the routers, and all that stuff seems pretty well cooked inside of BitTorrent. So it seems to me like there's a happy marriage between what we're trying to do with the decentralized internet and with Datalayer, because you have this file distribution and discovery problem that you need to solve. But like, is it necessary to invent it again, or can a lot of those things that are in BitTorrent just fundamentally be used here?
Yeah. Remember, if you remember a minute ago, I said the question was two-part. So I described how the data actually goes in and out of your Merkle tree. But the next problem absolutely is file propagation, or more specifically, Merkle tree propagation. And that's something that I'm still actively exploring. Out of the bat, I was going to probably do something similar to what CNI did with their first data layer, but the other things I realized is like the file propagation, or the Merkle propagation itself, like can be very modular in terms of it doesn't actually matter how the Merkle tree gets populated. You just got to get it from node to node. So I've actually kind of saw that there's a potential for IPFS to play a role here. IPFS itself isn't very fast in my experience, but from the propagation standpoint, that matters less than from the consumption standpoint. In answer your question about why aren't we just use BitTorrent, I've explored that in the past. When I was trying to massage CNI's implementation to be as reliable as possible, I kind of realized I was on the path to reinventing BitTorrent. So to answer your question, I haven't found the perfect answer yet, but these are all good questions. Like, yes, the BitTorrent could probably actually be used and yes, IPFS could probably be used. Yes, any number of file propagation protocols could be used, and it's just a matter of trying to nail down one that just works seamless for our scenario. My only hesitation, and maybe this is not a concern, but my initial concern was building dependencies on third-party software, but maybe that's not something to really worry about. Anyways, I'm actively looking at that exact question right now.
Yeah, some stuff that comes to mind is, when you're thinking about what BitTorrent was doing, it's busting the file into chunks and allowing those chunks to propagate throughout the internet, and this mechanism whereby the swarm is exchanging information about what pieces are needed by various parties and what pieces various players within the swarm have. To me, it seems like there's a lot of parallels here. If you're thinking about this type of decentralized internet, even if you were to just say, how do we cast it into the primitives that exist inside of BitTorrent, right? BitTorrent had like some hash of the data, fundamentally. So it's similar to what's being built here, but it was static. Like you couldn't change it over time. But I think even that idea that you're changing it over time, unless you're really intelligent about the specific chunks that haven't changed and saying, well, you already have this one because that file that results in that chunk didn't change in the newer commit. So you actually don't need to get some of those chunks to have the latest version of the file. You would have to publish a new tracker to the swarm. You know, it's like
Well,
there's
the new implementation takes a different approach into encoding the Merkle tree than the CNI's implementation in the first place. So the CNI's implementation copied the data out of the SQLite database and created these DAT files, which were, my understanding was they were in CNI's internal encoding for binary data, and they were just encoding the Merkle tree and the Merkle roots and these DAT files, and you end up with these huge files that needed to be pushed back and forth. With the Git like object model that I'm using now, the way the propagation is going to initially work is you just simply look at each root and you find which SHA-256s are associated with that root, and then you just push, those binary blobs like one by one across the from the peer that's requesting it. I think there's definitely optimizations that can be made, but I also think it's a lot easier to digest, a lot easier to build off of for like outside the main official client, where you can really, like, as long as you know how to locate the data from the nodes, you can do kind of partials until you get all the data you're looking for, because ultimately it's just file downloading. But I do think that there's a lot of stuff in BitTorrent that can be used, and it might be that ends up being what's being used for the file propagation layer. I just haven't decided yet, and it's just because I decide something doesn't mean somebody else can't do it. Like this protocol that I'm working on is completely open, and I've actually I've completed a specification paper that completely describes the open specifications for Datalayer, and then I'm working on the specifications for the dig node itself, and that's going to be published publicly. Probably on XCH today is where I'm hoping to publish it. And my real goal is that this makes it so easy to digest that anybody can just build to the protocol based off of what their stack requires. So if you don't want to use the main client, there's nothing in here that's rocket science where you can't build your own custom implementation that does it in the way that you need it to work, as long as you follow a few basic rules.
So there's kind of two sides of the fence, I think, is what I'm hearing. There's this side of what's published on chain. It's really talking about the what. What is the hash? What's the version of the data? What is the data, description and all that kind of stuff. And then there's the other side of it, which is, well, how do I actually connect to a swarm that allows me to find that data and use those hashes to verify that I got the right thing?
Yeah. Well, and even that, like, there's, how do I get the data from node to node? And if I'm a consumer that wants to consume a resource on Datalayer, how do I actually locate that and load it in the browser? So they're actually the two different systems.
So you really are at this point reinventing the internet.
Yeah. Ultimately, it is a protocol. Like okay, so it uses HTTP under the hood, but like on some level, it's also like an alternative protocol. I mean, at least the way that I see it.
Well, but I think the way you described it, when you're saying the distribution mechanism is separated from the actual what goes on chain, I think you could contemplate a distribution mechanism that wouldn't be HTTP necessarily, right?
It doesn't have to be. Yeah. So
right.
CNI's implementation was based on HTTP. It could also use IPFS. It could also use BitTorrent. It could use any number of things. Like it's just a matter of finding something that does the job that's seamless to the user.
Because as a content publisher, what you're really trying to do is you're saying, well, I need to put some information on chain that tells everybody about the content that I'm publishing, and then I need to get into some technology swarm peer-to-peer something or other that allows me to actually pay for the distribution of my data, and then that's how people would get access to it through whatever that distribution mechanism is.
Yeah. So if you're just a publisher and you don't want to be a node operator, right off the bat, I'm going to have something similar to GitHub, where you can create an account. You create, I call it a deployment, but it's basically a repository. You go to GitHub, you hit new repository. It gives you a connection string, just like GitHub does, and you just put that into your client, and then you just push your Merkle tree up to the GitHub-like service whenever you're ready to push it to the main network. And if you're running your own node, which is obviously going to have a little bit higher technical requirements, but for those that want to do it, like we're going to have a Docker compose set of containers that just puts it up for you. You can put up your own node, and that node will give you a local connection string that you just put into your data layer store, and then you can push to your local node, and it's up on the network. So it only needs to be up on one node to be on the network, and then it's like, okay, how do we incentivize other nodes to pick it up?
So that sounds like there's some opportunity for individuals that are already farming Chia to carve off some of their space
Yes.
and start publishing data layer data. Is that the initial target for how you would see getting people to start propagating?
Yeah. Well, on day one, I always imagined that Evergreen, for example, could bootstrap this network with their extra space that they have in their hubs. But it could be really anybody. And I do think that we can make this where for the node operators, it's more profitable than plot space. And for the data publishers is actually a pretty good deal compared to like other competitors like Bluehost or GeoCities. That's a joke.
So tell me a little bit about that, because let's say that I'm already an existing Chia farmer and Evergreen user, right? So I probably have some extra space lying around, right? I couldn't completely fill my drives. Maybe there's 90 gigs worth of space left over because I was using those 100 gig files or whatever, and I haven't converted over to, the new plot compression or whatever. So I've just got some, dust space sitting around. Do you envision having that person that has a Chia farm already online, has access to, a fully populated Chia database sitting there, and that being some additional piece of software that I download and start running that sits next to the Chia blockchain and the whole consensus mechanism?
Yeah, definitely, because the way I see it is you can make more per terabyte being a mirror provider than being a farmer. So it would, as a form of diversification, it would absolutely make sense to shave off a little bit for both sides. And the reason why I think it's more profitable is because in order to reach a peak level of decentralization it really depends on the data set. But for most applications, like you don't need every node in the world to mirror your data. You only need to probably put up enough of a incentive to get, I don't know, 10 or 20. But let's say you're putting up like a spot, like a DApp, something like Uniswap. Okay, like, and you know, the DApp itself isn't hugely, like, doesn't require a lot of space. And let's say you put up like $10 a month, $20 a month, you might get like 15 nodes across the world. That's probably plenty for your, you know, for your use case. And what is that, like, you know, 100 megabytes maybe? And you divide that $10 or $15 between like 15 nodes or 10 nodes or even 5 nodes. Like, I just think that like competes hugely with plot space. Like, it's worth it to, you know, to be make these mirrors if we can get the mirror market working as intended.
So, well, okay, that actually brings up a good point. So there's kind of three parts of this, right? You have what's being published on chain, it's the what. Then you have this mechanism for distribution, and then you have a marketplace for being able to get paid for doing this stuff, right?
Yes.
And talk to me a little bit about the getting paid for doing this stuff. So I'm hearing you say it at a high level. So did you have to adjust the chia list to allow for a market like this to exist? Is that part of what you had to do when you started creating the next version of it?
This market is post MVP and only exists as high level at this point in time. But once I get my MVP out, which I should have out in the next month, I think. Once I get that out, I can start thinking about how to actually do it. But my high level ideas is, well, you know, I explained earlier in this call that you know, the holy grail is, you know, like an automatic, you know, consensus mechanism, but I'm not there yet. So the way that I kind of see it as, you know, the new chip that Yak and I submitted for Datalayer allows the a Datalayer store to be a Chia Lisp oracle. So what happens is anybody can spend a Datalayer store, and it will create a coin announcement that announces the root hash of the store that can be consumed by another puzzle, and then that puzzle can validate that the data that you want to operate on belongs to that store, and if it does, you know, the puzzle's spendable. So at the very first iteration of this, until I figure out a way to make it like fully decentralized, fully automated, I was kind of seen as the DIG network is like an open protocol, but I'm going to build a incentive program on top of it that is slightly more centralized. And if you participate in my program, I'm going to go out there. I'm going to ping the different you know, mirrors at an interval. I'm going to test to see if they're online. I'm going to, you know, and if they do, I'm going to insert you know, that they were online in the oracle. And then I want to build this escrow system where the publisher can deposit funds into a coin, and the nodes can claim their payment out of that coin as long as my oracle says that they can. That's kind of like the high level of how I wanted to design it, like as the first iteration, and then from there, try to come up with better schemes that are more and more decentralized.
So you've got a pretty big pile of storage. Are you intending to, I don't know, devote some of that to bootstrapping this instead of doing it inside of AWS? I know that some of the data layer link stuff you were doing inside of AWS, right? Now that you've got your own storage and some relatively bottomless pit of it, are you devoting some of it to bootstrapping the
Yeah,
first version of it?
when I bought it, when I bought the farm originally, I always intended that it would be used to be a node provider for this network. So I want to help bootstrap the network, and require, like, a lot of people, they're only going to want to store, you know, nodes that they care about or nodes that they're being paid for. I want to store and mirror everything that I know about. just to help out and help get this thing going. Hopefully, over time, more and more as the system becomes more and more mature, my storage will be less reliant on the system working. But I definitely am expecting to use, there's about 10 petabytes there. I'm expecting to use that as necessary to be like a big mirror for as much stuff as I know.
So I know that one of the things that people get really nervous about when they think about something like a distributed internet with arbitrary data is that there would be questionable data in there that people might not want to propagate. Um, how much have you been thinking about, I don't want to propagate certain types of data, or policing it, or how do you actually know what it is that's being stored on your system, and how do you ensure that you don't store something you hadn't inadvertently not wanted to support? Like, let's say it doesn't fall within your ideals, and you say, as a person who is sovereign and saying, I don't really support this type of activity, I wouldn't want that data on my storage. Like, have you thought about that much at all, or is it still just buyer beware, propagate channels only that you are pretty confident that you should be propagating?
Yeah. So the node operators have full control over what it is that they actually want to mirror, and even though it's not foolproof, the label and description, metadata. Yes, someone could lie, but like for most honest data, it's going to it's going to give you an idea. So for a lot of the main data sets that matter, like the Uniswaps and the Tibet swaps and all that stuff, you could probably just build a whitelist into your node to for the stuff that you know about, and you might the give and take is you might achieve less revenue, but at least you feel good about it. The other thing that I'm doing personally for my node, and this unfortunately isn't something I can build into it. It's more of like, if you care about it, you got to set up yourself. But Cloudflare has a CSAM filter. So my personal node, I am going to wrap Cloudflare around, and if a user requests data that triggers a CSAM detector, I'll be notified. Not only will that data not be served to them through my gateway, my particular node, but I'll also know to blacklist that data store from my node. So I have been thinking about it. I don't have a foolproof solution, but I have a lot of high level ideas and strategies on how to approach it as a node operator. And this is something that I would want to go into detail about in documentation. When this all gets released and when I'm ready to talk about it.
Well, you've also mentioned content delivery networks, and I know that Chia Social was something that you was on your horizon in mind earlier. What about privacy of the data that gets passed around? Can anyone look through it, or is it encrypted? Is that
Okay, so the Chia Social is definitely something that still sticks in the back of my mind. And when I first conceptualized it, I was like, oh, I'm just going to fork CAD-T, because CAD-T is fundamentally a social protocol. That's going to fork CAD-T, change some stuff around, and be called a day. But then I realized to do it right, you really need infrastructure. And that's when I realized, like, before Chia Social is even a thought, we have to get the right infrastructure in place. That's what I'm focused on right now. Secondly, data on Datalayer is fundamentally transparent. I'm not going to promote this as the end-all, be-all for everything, but I do think it covers a very good chunk. And like a lot of low-hanging fruit use cases are NFT collections, dApps that we care about, that for some reason our governments want gone. Those are those things are fun. The data in those types of data sets are fundamentally transparent, and you do not need to worry about like secret data. Secret data on a public blockchain in general is still a problem that's hard to solve.
Right.
There's nothing stopping you. Sorry, I was going to say there's nothing stopping you from encrypting the data into your store, but that encrypted data will be out for everybody to look at, and you have a centralization choke point where only you can decrypt it. And there are some use cases where that's not bad. Like imagine you have the equivalent of a Google Photos account where it's like all your photos, and and Google is like displaying the photos in a nice front end for you to look at, but you decide you don't want Google anymore. So the data store is yours. Your photos are in your data store. You encrypt the photos so no one can look at it. You pay Google to back it up. But when you're sick of Google, you go somewhere else to say, I want you guys to back it up instead, and I'm going to pay you to do it. So it just makes frictionless service swapping, because ultimately you own your data and they're just providing a window into it.
So your first use case really here is the equivalent of public-facing websites, right? I mean, those fundamentally don't hold private data. It's like if Coca-Cola has a website, it's not like they're trying to put private or encrypted data on there. This is, hey, I want everybody to be able to know about whatever is at coca-cola.com, and that's ostensibly public.
I think that there can be private schemes invented, and I think there's probably going to be somebody else other than me that invents a good one. I'm trying to provide the foundation to allow that type of innovation to happen. But yes, my first use case is exactly what you said.
So going back to the Chia list for a second. So, I mean, fundamentally, when you're going to do something on the Chia blockchain, some amount of smart contract, whatever, needs to be written. So you did make a new version of it or worked with somebody. Can you tell us a little bit about that process and like what you guys added in as far as the specifics of the Chia list? And is that published for everybody to look at, or is that still coming?
Oh, it's all public. The chip is public. The source code is public. I can provide you the link. After the call, it's no problem. We with our new data layer store, we did a couple of different things. The first one that's the easiest to understand is we add the ability to add metadata fields for the purposes of indexers like SpaceScan. The second thing we did was we added they're called delegation layers. It's actually fully compatible. I mean, and this was Yak's genius. We built it in a way that's fully compatible with the original data layer stores at least the chain part is. And if you don't add any delegation layers, it just adds like a 1.0 data layer store. It just works like that. But
there's no upgrade path needed for anything that was published on old data layer. It's just immediately compatible.
Yes, for the puzzle. No, for the way that I'm encoding the data on your machine.
Gotcha. So you'd need to run some process to actually suck everything out of the SQLite database and put it on the file system.
Yes. But once
that little process is done, then
I haven't started on that, but it's something I do know that's going to have to happen. Or I have a meeting with CNI next week to explain to them what I did, and maybe they get on the same page and they implement my ideas. So if they implement my ideas, we're going to have a single system. If they decide to go a different direction, it's just going to be two systems that accomplish similar goals. And I might call mine something different, like Datalayer or something. What was I saying before? Can you remind me? I was talking.
We were talking about what you needed to do to upgrade to the new version.
Yeah. So if you have no delegation layers, it's just an old store. like this 1.0 data layer. You can upgrade 1.0 data layer stores on chain by adding delegation layers, and you have 3 layers that you can provide. You can add what's called an authorized writer. This allows you to delegate write access to somebody else. All they can do is modify the metadata in the store singleton, the root hash, label, description, and so on. And this is important if for people that don't want to run Chia or other clients on their machine, and they want a service to manage it for them. And all they have to do is upload their files to the service, and it just takes care of it for them. The other delegation layer is called admin. It's just super user access. You can do everything. You're just not the owner of the store. So you could transfer the store if you want. And then the third delegation layer is an Oracle puzzle, which just allows the store to be spendable, to be used as a Chia Lisp Oracle.
And then the last one, I think, but this is intact from the way it was before, is that you just have like a straight up owner, right? So is there a...
Oh yes, and you just have a straight up owner, and we built driver code to allow. Technically, this was possible with the old store, just no driver code was built. We now have the ability to transfer, send, and melt data layer stores in our driver code.
And so the concept there is, let's say some business had created a bunch of data and that business gets sold or something like that. Then when somebody acquires it, they'd be like, well, you already had those keys, so there's no way that I can know that, the wrong people don't have it. So I'm going to create my own set of keys, and then I'm going to transfer ownership to my own puzzle so that I take control of the data.
Yes, but what I think is even more powerful than that is combining this new store where the owner or the super admin or the writer, depending on how you want to set it up, is the key for a DAO. And you can make it where the data store cannot be updated unless a vote has happened on the DAO. Now you have this scenario where you can have true code bases that are owned by nobody other than a DAO, and the community votes on which code gets committed to the store or not. I think that's like the holy grail of where this type of mechanism leads up to. That doesn't exist anywhere else. Like we can't control, data layer is ultimately like a type of Git mechanism. So it's like Git. We can use it like Git, and we vote on pull requests to actually commit onto the chain, to commit the data to the store. Like, I just think that is insanely powerful, because you can now have these projects that are maintained by a dynamic group of anonymous developers with the right incentives to submit code, and that no one's submitting code unless everybody who's part of that DAO agrees, and that's enforced on chain.
So do you have a project in mind? Like, is Tibet Swap maybe a good candidate for that, or do you have something else that you think might be?
Yeah. So Yak himself said Tibet Swap will be the perfect example for that type of mechanism.
Seems like Tail Database is hungry for something like this too.
Yes, absolutely. Although I can't go into details, I'm just going to say there might be a really good solution for Tail Database that is fully autonomous coming down the pipeline. I'm not going to say anything more than that.
Well, I'm excited about that, but I won't ask you any other questions. But let's just hypothesize for a second that didn't exist or wasn't coming down the pipe. Because I think there have been some individuals who have run into this issue, right? Where if you wanted to use Tail Database, which for anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about here, Tail Database is this mechanism whereby Chia asset tokens, or the cat infrastructure on Chia, had some ability to say, here's the ticker symbol associated with this particular cat. Here's a description. Here's a logo, a bunch of metadata associated with tokens. And that was created by one individual. And that one individual, if he didn't, do some stuff, then nothing would get into tail database.
Yes.
So it's gotten very centralized and bogged down under a single owner. But
Yeah,
I think now
it's right. Tailbase is powered by Datalayer, but the first iteration of Datalayer had a central data publisher, and we're running into issues. So a lot of what I'm adding is to try to break that mold, so you can allow, like, we don't have the ability to do true community stores where anybody can publish, because I just haven't figured out how to make that work. But I think the DAO is like just as powerful.
Can we talk a bit about the spin bundles? And you two are much more familiar with how the spin bundles work. But when you mentioned earlier that that the first version of Datalayer was storing a lot more, or the CAD Trust system, the CNI version, stored a little bit more data on Chia, and that that you had minimized that and added different information that you could be publishing on the chain for the searchability, etc. But you also mentioned that you could see the pay for propagation being paying members of the Chia community a lot more for their hard drive space than farming for the consensus security. So can you tell me, you guys have a better idea, how much do these spin bundles cost? Because in one way we see XCH as being, I assume that spend is done in mojos, and in one way we see XCH as convertible to dollars or to other things, to NFTs. But is there going, if the entire internet starts being run on Chia, run on mojos, is that some, do you think about that with regards to making it adaptable as to how much you record on chain versus according to how much the conversion cost of XCH is? Like if you want to have larger bundles or more costly spin bundles.
Well, for one, the chip that I submitted, it is a little bit more expensive, and I decided it was a proper trade-off for what it was providing. I decided, like, okay, a lot of the stuff is one-offs, or at least you're not doing it every second. So if you have to pay a couple more cents, fine. But I guess your question really hits on, like, what happens if XCH all of a sudden explodes in price. And I mean, I think that's a good problem to have if we run into it, and potentially L2 solutions would have to be conceptualized. I don't have any real answers beyond that.
I just think that it seems to me to be a really good problem to have, because thinking in terms of the use in communication costs of XCH, to me would actually benefit Chia, and it's wonderful to have, I don't know, dollar support in the conversion of XCH that we've seen heretofore. But in some ways, I don't know, as the pressure mounts for available mojos out there for people to be to hold on to, so that they can engage in the transfer of data, that would be the most ideal case. So
Lucas, wait a minute. Let me see if I can pick this apart for a second.
Sure.
So there's a couple things going on here. One is, anytime you're actually taking up some block space on Chia, you got to pay for that. So what Michael is talking about with the cost of the puzzle going up, so you're putting a bunch of data on the chain and you're buying up some amount of the block space. This is the same as all other blockchains, right? And it really speaks to the fundamental use case of Chia, which is to buy block space. That is the usage of Chia because that's how you pay farmers, right? So if you think about this starting to get popular, then yeah, you're going to start to have pressure on block space because it'll be a very valid use case for Chia is to just keep buying block space to say, here's the new version of this data, or here's the data I'm publishing. Then the next part of it is, how do you actually facilitate this market, right? Like, how do you pay people for actually propagating the data? That you could do it in any kind of payment mechanism that Michael wants to do. Like, that's a system that he's creating and doing in whatever way that he feels best. If he wanted to put pressure on Chia, then he would say that market is entirely done in Chia, but otherwise he might contemplate doing it with, the wrapped USDC that was just created on the bridge, or maybe with, the new Circuit DAO Byte Cash or something like that. That market is up to the discretion of whatever Michael does and what they do with the marketplace of the decentralized propagation of data and the resiliency of data. That whole, I'll pay $10 or $20 or whatever to have some number of nodes per month.
And to add to that, the way that this protocol is built, like the incentive mechanism that I build is, it's basically a business built on top of the open dig network. There can be competing incentive mechanisms that other people build that do different things in different ways. And that just creates, choices like, okay, I'm going to participate in this incentive market because it benefits me. So it's like, there's nothing like whatever I come up with, I hope that people use it, but maybe someone comes up with something better. Like it's essentially treated as a business system built on top of the open dig network.
Does that help answer that question, Lucas? I don't know if that spoke to exactly what you were trying to ask, because I think you said something about spend bundle, and that has a specific meaning within the world of Chia, and it really has to do with how you package up a set of coin spends on Chia.
Well, it seemed to me that you were, and yes, it did help actually, Grant. You put it a lot better. You described the different relationships better than I could. But I guess what I was getting at is, it would seem to me that because of that juncture between the use of Chia for the spin bundles, and the fluctuating price in dollars or whatever that may be in Chia, that you might also you might be trying to make that a gamut of options as to how much you want to actually record on Chia, or how much that you want to record in Datalayer, rather than.
The metadata fields are all optional. You're just going to have decreased visibility, and maybe that doesn't matter for your use case.
Okay, that's so you have multiple metadata fields. So whenever somebody is publishing that to the blockchain, they can. What you're saying is that it's going to cost more the more metadata fields that they want to include for searchability or. Okay.
And it is important to understand, though, that cost is every coin spend, not just initiating the store, unfortunately. But
I mean, unfortunately, maybe for the users of a distributed internet, but fortunate for farmers and for Chia, right?
Yes, and one thing I forgot to add when I just was describing the new chip, that also adds a whole nother variable to this equation of monetizing Datalayer, is I mentioned that we put in the ability to turn a Datalayer store into a Chia Lisp Oracle service. We actually built in a mechanism where the store owner can set a fee in the puzzle. So if you want to use a store as a oracle, you actually have to create a coin spend to the owner to unlock that ability. So I imagine like very highly valuable oracles. Maybe Mint Garden creates oracle of rarity scores. So you can say, I'm going to create an offer file. I'll buy anything that has a rarity score of 5 or higher for, I don't know, 10xch. And then by using that oracle, Mint Garden gets paid for it. So as another mechanism for profiting off of using data layer, we like people can maintain highly valuable data sets that are used in Chia Lisp to power smart contracts, and they get paid for it. So it might cost a lot of money to put a lot more data into your puzzle, but with the right business plan, like I imagine, like it could also be highly profitable to suck up that initial cost.
Absolutely agreed. Go ahead, Grant.
Thinking about oracles for a second. So the oracle comes into play in the marketplace, right? When you're actually saying, I'm going to pay people who have made the data available. Have an agent that's out there pinging these people who have advertised that they're making the data available, ensuring that they're doing what they said they're going to do, and then calculating some kind of a proportionate payout for the amount of availability that they had. Is that kind of right in a nutshell what the Oracle is doing?
I'm not sure, but let me try to describe it a little bit more, because I do really want to promote this Oracle capability because I think it's so powerful. And any data layer store can be an Oracle. So you can have a store that's like has like nothing important, or you can have a store that's like highly valuable. But it's up to the person who's building the Chia list, the puzzle of the thing that they're building to decide which stores are you matter to them. I imagine there could be abstractions that automate discoverability, but right off the bat, I kind of see it as like Mint Garden might just promote on their website, use my oracle or my set of oracles that, and here's all the store IDs that do X, Y, and Z, and yes, now with a little bit extra driver code, we can build into offer file generation usage of those oracles as part of the trade. I imagine that Circuit DAO could potentially create an oracle of conversions of XCH to USD. So in Chia Lisp, you can actually create offer files that trade non-stable assets based off of stable prices. And so in the beginning, I kind of just see them, these are people that we trust. And I kind of see them saying, I'm maintaining an oracle and I set this price to use my oracle. It might just be in the couple mojos, like, because when you make the money in bulk, you don't make the money off of one single usage. But they do have the ability to set whatever price they want. And I just imagine like these ecosystem participants that the community trusts are going to promote that they are maintaining an oracle, and you should use their oracle in your next service that you're building. Now, if there's a way to abstract that further and make an entire like auto discovery mechanism, like kind of like chain link kind of deal, that's something that comes later. But I think off the bat, like it's just a matter of publishing your intention to be an Oracle maintainer and having enough clout in the community where people trust and want to use your data. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that you are uncovering I don't know things that we need in order to I don't know, so both subscription models and the propagation that are going to be necessary for a decentralized internet.
Yeah, I can imagine like a flywheel that's built where it's. But I'm just going to use Aceville just as a hypothetical. Like I've never had a conversation with them about this or not, but just as a hypothetical, Aceville provides on Mint Garden a data store that keeps rarity scores for each NFT. And then CNI builds into their offer file generation. The same way they kind of like integrated a tail database, they integrate Aceville's data store as an Oracle service, and into offer file generation into their front end. So now people can actually build complex offer files based off of that Oracle. That's probably going to be used a lot. So every time someone comes in and creates an offer file to make trades based off of this data layer data, Aceville gets paid. And then Aceville turns around and says, well, I need to make sure that this is backed up around the world. It's very important. So then he takes a chunk of it, might shave off some for himself, but then takes a chunk of it and puts up as an incentive for mirrors, for the mirrors to provide it, to be backups of that data, in also like in location specific areas, so it's fast to retrieve. So we can kind of build this flywheel where like we're building an economy for XDH or other tokens to incentivize a more complex ecosystem.
You say flywheels, I'm thinking of toll booths.
Flywheel in the sense of when you start this thing going, that it starts to build upon itself. The flywheel in startup world is when you start to get this circular thing, that the more something gets used, the more it builds the usage of the thing itself. Like that's the fundamental thing you're trying to get going when you first bootstrap a network and you get something going.
I was picturing a flywheel on a clutch there. More gears, win reverse, no reverse. Michael, are there aspects of data layer that you're excited about that we haven't touched out on, or that are sort of murkier, other holy grails that you have that you're thinking about further down the road?
Well, we've really kind of touched on both things that we're working on right now, and things that I imagine come later. I really do, to rehash, I do really think the holy grail is building up infrastructure to a point where we have a custom browser that just interacts directly with the chain to load data, instead of going through any centralized source. That's something that I'm not going to be able to do alone. And if I consider success is when I've inspired enough people to either do that or fund a team to do that, or all the above. I really think like once we get there, and then in the next step is like discoverability, we have truly transformed, the internet, and we just let it grow organically from there. In terms of things what's going on now, I completing the new data layer client that I announced the other day. I've removed all the roadblocks to get to the next stage of where I want to go, and that is getting the dig network up and running, which it has been running. It just unfortunately been too hard for developers to use it. Building a tool that makes it easy for developers to use it, and then providing a GitHub type service to be that kind of like first bootstrap mega node to get things going, and then figure out a way to incentivize other people to join in. So that part, like I'm closing in. I'm almost there. Like I just completed a major part today before the call for the tool. I have one more behavior to push, and that's just to pull down data down from a dig node into your repository, to pull the Merkle tree down. And then I'm going to release that tool for alpha testers probably in the next week or two. And then I just need to build a front end, like I did with Datalayer storage, so that you can, so I can be the GitHub for your store, and that's a major step, because now I've streamlined, now a developer can just build it into their CI and go from CI release to being live on the network. Like, that's huge. And once I get there, like, all the tools are there for anybody to pick it up and run with it how they see fit. But I'm just going to keep building to try to make it better and better. And hopefully one day attract funding to make it my full-time thing. I mean, right now it is my full-time thing, but it'd be nice to get paid to make it my full-time thing.
Amen to that. The notion you mentioned earlier that a browser is going to be crucial for or is going to be part of your vision in the future. I actually thought of Opera. Grant, you mentioned Chrome. There's a lot of browsers out there: Firefox, Chrome, Microsoft. But it would seem to me that browser companies would be very interested in an idea like this, because they're looking for separation from so many browsers that already exist.
Maybe. Like, I think it really matters on how many users. If we can say we have like 100,000 users, they might be like, yes, sign me up. But like, if we have 5 users, that's a lot much harder to sell. I imagine.
Well, wait a minute. Is it the kind of a thing where you could add an extension, or did you say? Because I thought you mentioned something
I
about
looked into it. I'm not an expert at extensions, but from my understanding, the extensions were too locked down to do it. And to back up my conclusion, I found a GitHub issue thread on IPFS. They're trying to do exactly the same thing, and they came to the same exact conclusion in that issue.
But does IPFS have petabytes of storage?
We're talking about the IPFS protocol, IPFS : // What I'm trying to build is a chia : //
Well, I guess what I'm saying, because you mentioned users, but if I was in a conversation with browsers, I would say, like, you could be the front door into such a large amount of possible storage.
Yeah, there could be a lot of different angles to go to. I got to get into that. I got to get the technology there where I can show them, like, this is a serious.
I think I understand what you're saying. So, like, anything like FTP or HTTP or something like that you're able to put into the browser, that's fundamentally programmed into the browser at the core level. That's not something that an extension can add support for another protocol. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I looked into like just simple string replacement. Like, it just won't accept it. I tried, and maybe somebody else can figure it out, but I couldn't.
So is there a thought that you would take some existing browser that already, is open source or whatever, and then you would start to make modifications to it, and that would be the genesis of your
There's two ways.
browser?
There's the 2 ways I thought about it. Either become important enough that I approach Brave browser and ask them to put it in. And the second approach was fork Chromium and put it in myself. Now, I forked Chromium, and I looked through that code base, and I said to myself, this is not something that I'm ever going to be able to do. And then I went, So I kind of came to the conclusion that either somebody in the community that is really has a lot of knowledge in that type of stuff can do it, or I can become important enough to get funding to build a custom browser that directly interacts with the Chia blockchain.
I know that in times past you were putting up some things and saying, "Hey, I'm going to fund some things in the Chia ecosystem, whatever." Is this a bounty that you're possibly contemplating? Saying, "I'll put up a bounty if somebody actually forks Chromium and adds the decentralized internet protocol to the URL bar"?
That can be a bounty later. I don't have the ability to offer one right now. The development I had done for the chip was just completely broke my bank, and I got to recover for a little bit.
Gotcha. There was already significant amount of effort and money that's been put into what you've gotten so far.
I've already invested about $200,000 in this project. So it's more than just me. Like I've been paying community members, several community members, behind the scenes to help out. I mean, this has actually been a community project. There are a lot of names that you would recognize. Yak, Rigidity, Drac. A lot of people have had their hands on this and helping me out when I could, because it has reached a complexity where I can't do it by myself. And I just started asking for help, and people should be paid for their work, so I've been paying them for their work. And I hope one day that we can complete it, and it does something. But yes, this has totally been like a community project in a sense.
Well, I, for one, thank you for the work that you put into it, Michael. I wish that we had more attention and more eyes on it, more support from you. Which to the listeners also, I'm sure you take donations or any help that they have.
Well, the donations are nice. And I've used every donation I could, and I've just returned it back to the community. The only issue, not to discourage anyone that wants to help, but $5 here, $5 there, doesn't, like, we need like major funding, like VC level funding is, I guess, what I'm trying to get at. But if anyone wants to help, I can assure them that they're not just supporting this project, but they're also supporting the community, because I use those donations to hire community members for the time to help out with this.
And how did you launched a collection that was also as an experiment for the use of it too, the minions. How have the minions gone?
The minions, I consider it a success. I got a lot of traction. In terms of profitability, I kind of just broke even. I had to pay a designer to help me build it, and I ended up kind of just paying him for his services. I got a little bit on top. It was nice. I'm not going to complain about it, but it wasn't like the level of funding that I would really need to accelerate this.
Well, I'm maybe a little bit glad to hear that you didn't love launching a collection and were abandoning Datalayer to become to just launch projects on the blockchain. Good news, maybe a little good news for us all. Are there other things that you work on alongside Datalayer, or does it take up most of your attention right now?
I started getting involved with a couple different projects that didn't really work out. Honestly, I kind of came to the conclusion that Datalayer is where I'm home, and that's what I want to work on. So I had to step away from various other things that I wish I could still could still continue being involved in, but I realized I need to focus, and there's two reasons for that. One, my daughter just got really sick, like a lifelong disease. I need to be there for her more, and two, I just wanted to focus on one thing. So between those two things, I decided to take a step back from everything that I was working on. Like I don't even have a day job right now. I'm just 100% working on Datalayer.
Oh, I didn't. And I'm sorry to hear about your daughter. But well, I'm glad to hear you're working on Datalayer. Again, I think that that breaking the cloud is something that I don't even I don't understand all the aspects that it's going to take. But I'm glad that that you have made it a goal, a mission to do so. It was one thing that I had always hoped that blockchain could bring in different ways, and decentralizing information, getting us away from addiction to the cloud. And whenever I think you came to my attention with your Chia Social and ideas there, which I thought would be incredible, because it seems that no matter who is the middleman for our data, they seem to be unable to resist either censoring it or manipulating it in terms of ad monetization, etc.
I think that project comes one day, whether me or from somebody else. The biggest theme that I've run into is Datalayer is hard, and I'm trying to make it easy, and I'm on like the 5th iteration of trying to make it easy. And I think I'm finally found something that I do think is going to break through. But unfortunately, that's just meant that I've spent longer than I thought to accomplish what I wanted to thought. And I really just can't think about other, what comes next, because everything rides on getting this technology out there.
Yeah, it's really hard to conceptualize a distributed social network without distributed data, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think some of the things that you're contemplating as far as how do I get from where I ultimately see this technology being versus how do I make it easy enough that people can start to adopt it, and then move away from some of the centralization aspects and have a clear path towards how do I make it decentralized? I think that's pretty brilliant, obviously, and deep insight into how you need to build stuff so that you can start it and then eventually get where you want to go.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I couldn't have done anything without the community. I have a lot of people that wanted to be early adopters. Every day I was like, all right, I made it easy. I finally made it easy. And then I get them to use it, and it's like, it's not easy. And like, it's just been like setback after setback, but I've learned so much. I gotten to know the needs of people other than me. And like, so like, what I'm about to release, I really, really hope that this fits the bill, because it's just based off of so much trial and error. So other people getting excited about it, using it, and not working for them. Like, I just want to make it work for them so bad. And that is really like the biggest obstacle to adoption is it's right now it's just too hard for developers to use it. And if I can solve that problem alone, even if I don't finish everything that I got to, the stage will be set for other people to pick it up. And I plan on finishing what I set out to do. So I'm hoping that the stage is set for other people to innovate. It really needs to be more than just me. Like this can be a huge, like this is so huge in my opinion, like a whole movement. And if we can get other people to believe in it, other people that want to build on top of it, other people that want to improve it, it could just turn into a movement that, I mean, despite the implications of the internet in general, like just the implications for Chia as a blockchain could be astronomical. And
Wow.
I don't.
I think that's our ending statement, Michael. That was fantastic. Like, really appreciate you taking some time to talk with us today. Inspiring words to end the show and to get everybody excited about where Chia can go, where the decentralized internet can go, and how these fundamental building blocks come together to make the next generation of the internet.
Yeah, thank you.
Unless you have something else to say. I mean, I just thought that was a great ending point. I mean, it's up to you.
No, that's pretty much sums it all up.
All right.
Well, thanks for coming on, Michael. And yeah, I thought that was a great ending too.
Okay, I'm gonna click a button then.
All right, well, click it.